Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Leadership Project with your host Mick Spears. We bring you thought-provoking guests and topics every week to challenge your thinking about leadership. Our aim is to help you become the leader that you wish you always had as we learn together and lead together. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Leadership Project. We have a special guest joining us today, which is Zach Montroy. Zach is the CEO and founder of the Intention Collective, and his very business name caught my attention. And you can imagine that is what we are going to unpack today, this word intention and this word collective. So it's going to be an interesting discussion. He's a leadership coach with more than 20 years experience in executive roles, and he helps teams to develop healthy environments so that they can be successful. So successful scaling businesses on the back of healthy environments based on trust, based on empowerment, and based on working together. So excited for today's discussion. It's an unscripted show, so you never know where we might end up, but that will be the theme today. Will be around intentionality and around where we're better together, right? So in a collective environment. So Zach, without any further ado, I'd love for you to give us a flavor of your background and what was it that inspired you to start this business in particular and do the work that you do?
Sure. Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be with you all and just honored to be a guest on your podcast. Yeah, my story is probably like many others. Grew up in a, pretty lower middle class home and, knew from an early age that I was going to need to work if I wanted to go to college. And that was really where I was first exposed to leadership. I worked at a KB toy store, which is, I don't think they're even in existence anymore, but got a chance to lead and manage and move up in that organization. And even during college, had to work full time. And unfortunately, during college, really got exposed to very unhealthy leadership and what that looked like in an organization and the toll that that took on teams, the toll that that took on me. And, really vowed from that point forward to really look at this idea of leadership as a privilege, as a responsibility, as an opportunity, that it wasn't command and control, which is what I was kind of taught and modeled, but rather, how do I figure out the unique ability of the team members that I'm working with and really let them utilize their giftedness and get to see that potential come forward in their, in them really being able to live into that on a daily basis. That leadership was about service, not about what I get to tell people to do. So, I started in HR, moved up in HR and really kind of moved into operations and got a chance to lead a team of over 100 and had a big budget, but kind of got bored in the day-to-day of that. It was, I loved the peopling side. I loved developing leaders. And so I had the opportunity about 6 years ago to move into consulting and leadership coaching and just know in my own story that that was a pivotal point for me in my development and learning to grow and to be challenged. And so took that leap about 6 years ago, moved my family down to Nashville, Tennessee. And in that work, got to work with some amazing clients and organizations and wanted to do my own thing, create a company for myself, really uniquely position ourselves to be able to serve companies sort of in the day-to-day, in addition to the strategic side of getting to lead organizations. And we've, just been very blessed this year to have grown. And we have a team of 7 now on our staff and getting, again, to work with some pretty amazing leaders in some pretty amazing organizations.
Outstanding, Zach. Well, congratulations on your success and the path that you've taken there. There's lots to unpack in terms of different things that you've said there, and I want to pick on a few to begin with, and I'm sure that throughout the show we'll probably unpack all of them. The first thing you said was around privilege and responsibility, and that is what leadership is. So I'd like to remember that we're responsible for the place where people spending up to 1/3 of their life, right? And that is a responsibility, and with that we need to take that very seriously. And it is a privilege. You then also said that during your college years, you experienced some pretty unhealthy leadership. Tell us what that looked like.
Yeah, I love Brene Brown's definition of a leader. A leader's anyone who anyone who sees potential in people, in processes, and in ideas, and has the responsibility, has the courage to develop that potential. And, to me, that's a great privilege. Like you said, 1/3 of our lives is spent at work, and really creating a place where we serve the people that we work, we serve the work itself. Like that, to me, is healthy leadership. It's in service to others. So when I saw toxic leadership, when I saw unhealthy leadership, that looked a lot like command and control leadership. That looked a lot like tell people what to do, really embracing and encouraging workaholism. It was under the guise of do whatever it takes, which sounds good. And you're like, yeah, I guess I need to do whatever it takes. But whatever it takes meant 80, 90, 100-hour weeks. Whatever it takes meant, you can't have a raise this year because, XYZ initiative is more important than us getting a raise. You're young. We're giving you the privilege of working here. So you basically should work for less than minimum wage. That leader, I tell this story all the time. The advice that he used to give to us younger leaders on the team was make sure that you always sit in a chair that's higher than everybody else's chair so that they know that you're in control of the situation. And I look back on that like, what foolish advice was that? And it was, just churn as many people as you can, get them to do the work for as long as you can, and know that they're going to leave pretty quickly thereafter, which just continued to breed toxicity in the organization.
So what did you learn about leadership in those moments? Tell us more.
Learned a lot of what not to do. That's for sure. I think one of the biggest lessons from that was that if you're going to be a courageous leader, you have to embrace vulnerability as part of that. That the leader that I worked for, the environment was the opposite of vulnerable. It was very protected. It was very, about what other people thought of you. You really put your self-worth into the hands of other people. It was, your worth is tied to your work. And so I think for me, was really learning, who I am is who I am. Yes, there are things that I can do to improve, but I'm not going to put my self-worth in the hands of somebody else. And cultivating people's well-being and talent is incredibly important. Investing in people is incredibly important. Work at any cost is not. Who I am and how I lead, doing the work of being an inwardly sound leader is incredibly important to how I show up, how I serve the people who I get the privilege and opportunity to work with, how I care for them is radically important. I think those were the key lessons looking back that I didn't get to experience, but now have become very, very important to me.
Yes, I'm sorry that you went through that, right? In one way, and in another way, that what a great learning for you that has now inspired you to do what you do today. So the Zach that is sitting in front of me today may not be the Zach that does what he does today without some of that experience. So you can't kind of just go, oh, wow, that should never have happened. It shouldn't, but in some respects, it inspired to what you do today. There was some key words that you pulled out there. You were saying things like you didn't allow someone else to determine your self-worth, right? So you were strong enough in your convictions to go, no, you don't determine my self-worth. I do. I thought that was very powerful. And you were very consciously watching what that toxic leader was doing so that you would not mimic the behaviors going forward was the next part. And then the third part was the element around almost like that dependence. I'm trying to find the right words for this, but you were saying that the leader had this posturing of you're young, this is a privilege for you to work for me kind of thing. You should feel honored. And if you want to stick around here, you'll do as I tell you. Now, where I'm going with all of this, what I want to hear from you is what advice do you have for the next generation that are out there that may be sitting in one of those offices now? They may be Zach 20 years ago sitting in a toxic environment where they feel like, oh, is this the way the workplace is supposed to be? Is this normal? Oh, it must be normal. You know what I'm talking about? You're in your first job. You've landed, unfortunately, in your first job in a toxic leader who's got a command and control model, but you don't have a reference model to know that, no, it shouldn't be like that. What advice do you have for people that might be sitting in a role like that right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think the easy advice is always to say, get out, go look for another job. I mean, I get the part of that, though, that feels like I can't, right? Like, I don't want to have a 4-month stint on my resume. I do think the advice that I would, or maybe the questions I would ask them to consider, what is it worth to you? This is every job, everything that we spend time on is an investment. Is this a worthy or worthwhile investment for you? What in the end is this going to cost you in terms of your physical well-being, your mental health well-being, your relational well-being? I think, oftentimes when you're in your first job and you're young and right out of college, a lot of bosses, I don't want to say leaders, take advantage of that. And, you're working the 90-hour consulting gig and you're a road warrior. So what is that toll? What's that going to take on you? I think for me, those are the questions I think you have to go through and really figure out, what is this season? What is this going to cost me? What should I be prioritizing? What really is important in the end to me? And I also would say, what are some healthy boundaries maybe that I need to start putting up to get to a healthier place? What can I control here? And what boundaries do I need to sort of put up in order to build a healthier relationship for me in this scenario?
Yeah, really good. So I like that word that you used, investment. You are an investor as well. You're investing your time, and time is the most precious thing we have. It's the only truly non-renewable source that we don't have. Once it's gone, it's gone. So if you're investing your best years in a company that is not treating you well, is this the best investment of your time? That's really good. And the lesson around boundaries, that can be a difficult one to learn, but understanding boundaries as quickly as you can in your career is also quite a healthy thing. Then when I look at the person in front of me, Zach, then I see someone that has learnt a lot from that. And I think this is an important lesson for us to discuss with the audience right now, is about role modeling and learning and pocketing all of those experiences and decide what you're going to do with them, right? So one of the unfortunate things, Zach, in the world that we live in, because, only 20% of people in the world truly love their job and like their boss. 20%, 1 in 5. And what usually happens is people land in their very first leadership role before they've had any true leadership training, and therefore usually their only go-to is to start mimicking the behavior of the ones before them, which is, I purposely used that word before because you did not do that. I'll use your word now, intentionally decided not to mimic the behavior of the command and control toxic leader before you, and you broke away from the mold. But many people, here's the interesting thing, many people, they have a toxic boss, they absolutely don't like it, then 5 years from now, they end up in their own leadership role and they catch themselves in a cycle of repeating the model because that was their role model of what leadership looks like. Tell us how you broke the mold and how you made yourself a stronger leader like this.
Yeah, I want to be careful. I don't know that I broke the mold right away. I also realized I really sucked at command and control leadership. Like I did try it because I'm like, well, you can get anyone to do whatever you want. I just was not very good at it. I felt like it felt bad. It felt icky. I thought I wasn't. So I kind of went through that whole process of like, well, I guess I'm not a leader. I can't do this well. And then figured out like, I don't really know that that's the person that I want to be. But you're exactly right. When we do not process in our own stories and do the work of integrating, our thoughts, our behaviors, our emotion, our, sort of that affect, cognition, who we are, you're exactly right. We just play out the narrative. It's why, like, as parents, we find ourselves repeating the same things or doing the same things our parents did that we vowed we would never do. I think the same is true for us as leaders, right? When I'm not doing the work of self-leadership and really reconciling my story, understanding who is it that I want to be, what are the habits, said or unsaid, that I need to make sure that I am not carrying forward. How do I make sure that I'm building self-awareness to understand those areas so that I can, create different habits, better ways of leading? I think that takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of processing. It takes a lot of integration. It's why, you hear people like Jim Collins and Patrick Lencioni say, I've never met a transformational leader who didn't have a coach and or therapist by their side, because we need to process this stuff. We bring all of who we are into work every day. We don't check the leadership experience or the bad leader that I had 10, 15 years ago at the door when we come into work. That's a part of our being. So we are either going to process that stuff intentionally with people who care about us, with people who care for us and want to challenge and grow us, or we're going to be working that stuff out unintentionally on people who don't deserve to have that stuff worked out on them.
Yeah, a powerful message there. We are a collection of our experiences, and I like that word process. So are you going to consciously process that stuff, or are you just going to just let it bubble away and you just bumble through life? If you process it, you can turn it into positive lessons. You can help it forge who you are, or it can be just a subconscious thing that just you become an element or a result of those experiences, but without any kind of intentionality there. So that's a brilliant bridge now, the segue towards your business is called the Intention Collective. And I want to unpack it twice, one at a time. What does the word intention mean to you, and why is it so important?
Yeah. I think for me, the intentionality probably is a word I maybe overuse. I like to think I just like to use it a lot. But when I look at anything great, anything of substance, anything that is worthy, is worthwhile, has meaning, I think that there's great intention associated with that, right? We don't just grow into great human beings. We don't just raise great kids without great intention to that. We don't just create great companies that are accidental. I think the idea of intention to me means like there's something worthy here. There's something that deserves my time and my energy and my attention. And, I've got to have a clear plan and path for how I'm going to make an investment here. And so when the idea of Intention Collective was actually an idea of a name that came right away, it wasn't something that took me a long time, mainly because when I think about healthy leaders, when I think about exceptional leaders, when I think about exceptional companies, there is great intentionality in how those companies are led, how they're managed, how they care for their team and their employees. And so to me, that was really important to the work that we do and important to who we are as leaders. And it was really integral to who we want to be as a company.
So what does intentionality as a leader look like?
I always go back to this great book. It's Exceptional Leaders or Leaders Worth Following, I think is the name of the book. And they talk in the book about how the most exceptional leaders, when you kind of look at these big 10 attributes around leadership, about 70% of our effectiveness as leaders is being inwardly sound and others focused. And the work of being inwardly sound is really the work of being self-aware, the work of being empathetic, the work of being courageous, the work of being vulnerable, the work of being others focused is really about, serving others, developing others, seeing in others their potential, helping to develop that, realize that, put that to work, knowing that as leaders, we have to be committed to getting it right, not just being right. All of that is, to me, requires great intentionality. It requires, putting habits and behaviors, a way that we're going to operate together. That's really kind of at the end of intentionality, really the working definition to me of being an intentional leader, an intentional manager.
So on a day-to-day basis, what does it look like? So if we've got people in the audience that are going, yeah, I'm kind of getting this, but what do they do? What does an intentional leader do that, let's say, someone that doesn't focus on intentionality doesn't do?
Yeah, I think that there's great attention to where we're spending our time. I think that there's great attention. It really kind of starts with, what is my unique giftedness, my unique ability? What is it sort of that I'm here on this earth to do? What's the impact that I want to make in this job, in this role, in this leadership life? Like, what's my intention? What's the impact that I want to leave, that I want to make here? And then how does that connect to my unique ability? What am I gifted to do? What am I skilled at? Where does my education, my experience lie? And what's the highest and best use of those gifts in the organization? So for me in this role, it's, really working with new clients, developing our leaders, developing our presence, our brand, who we are. And so how does that line up with where I'm spending my time? I think when I look at being intentional, it really means, how am I intentional with my time, with my calendar, with my energy? Am I intentional from a holistic perspective in how and where I'm spending time with my wife and with my kids? Am I really prioritizing, where I need to be investing time and energy and effort and money in the different areas and domains of my life? So if we get into the nitty gritty, what does my calendar look like? Am I prioritizing my energy throughout the day? Am I spending time, working out, making sure that I am, in the best spot that I can be as a leader? Am I being intentional in how I lead one-on-ones and how I'm caring for my team members? And I think underneath that is some really healthy systems. There's time for learning and growth and really implementing that learning in the work that I do. But intentional for me means I have a plan. I'm, working that plan, and I really have given every aspect of where I'm spending my time on a daily basis great thought and energy, and, to overuse the word, intentionality in where I'm putting that.
All right. Really good, Zach. So I'm picking up three things there, and then I want to add something and see how it sits with you. So the first thing I'm picking up is around that self-awareness, knowing oneself, having that deeper understanding of who I am as a leader. Together with that is knowing what my own superpowers are. So what am I bringing to the table, and how do I best allow my strengths to come to the fore for the betterment of the team? And then the third one, which I think was very powerful there, which was, where is my time going? So having a look at my calendar and going, is my calendar and my diary arranged in a way that I am serving the organization, serving my team, serving myself, and allowing my superpowers to come through, because I've got that level of organization in my calendar that I know where my time is being spent. You touched on something interesting there about the one-on-one. I tell you what I think of when I think of intentionality at the next level of detail down within that calendar is about every one of those meetings that I'm going in to take a moment and think, how am I showing up? How am I showing up to that meeting? What does my team need me to be in that meeting today? Do they need me to be curious? Do they need me to be inspirational? Do they need me to be conciliatory? What is going to be my role in this meeting today, which needs to be adaptive depending on the environment? So if you want your team to bring new ideas to the table, you better not go into the meeting starting off with your ideas, because they're just going to repeat your ideas back to you. So intentionally going into a meeting and go, right, I'm going to be the last person to speak in this meeting today. And yet the next meeting, it might be I need to give the team some energy today. So I'm going to come in with some kind of inspirational opening speech today, but I'm not leaving any of this to chance. I'm doing it intentionally every day. How does that sit with you?
I love that. I heard a while back this idea, this quote, and it really resonates with me. When you're leading and, the group, the activity, whatever it is you're doing requires vulnerability, the leader should always go first. Vulnerability is that feeling of messiness, that uncertainty, risk, emotional exposure. Leaders should lead. Leaders should go first and model the way. When it requires sharing an idea, confirming, debating, leaders go last. Let your team go first. Give them the floor so that you're not intentionally or unintentionally making them bandwagon, or the halo effect thing is going on there. I think that that's really, really wise advice. And I love what you said there too about practicing mindfulness going into every meeting. I think it's so easy to just let our calendars dictate our lives. And if we're not, even leaving 5-10 minutes in between meetings to go, how do I need to show up? What does this person need from me? What do I need to be mindful of? Man, we just get lost. And I think we end our day like, oh, I really didn't show up in a great way in that meeting. Why did I do that? We're not over identifying with emotion. We're really just identifying, okay, what am I feeling? What am I thinking? What do I need to do here? What do I need to be mindful of? How can I serve this person? Those are quick questions you can ask, and frankly, sort of recenter your brain and mind before you go into what is going to be an important interaction with another human.
Yeah. And you're right. It can only takes 5 minutes. Take 3 deep breaths and go, right, what was my intention to this? What I do, Zach, is at the start of the day, I look at my calendar and I think about what intentionality I have for every meeting at the start of the day. But even then, I still do that 3 deep breaths before I go into each of the meetings to go, okay, what was I going to, my intention in this meeting is I need to give some feedback. So the word that I'm going to use for intentionality right now is clarity. I might throw compassion in there as well. So if I'm giving feedback and it might be constructive feedback, my 2 words that I might think of going into the meeting is clarity and compassion. Because if you want someone to act on feedback, it does need to be clear, but you also want to do it in a way that's empathetic and understanding the other person's perspective. So personally, I use a few key words. One, just by chance, a lot of them end up starting with the word C, but I think that's a coincidence. There's another C, but it'll be, all right, in this meeting, I'm going to be curious. I'm going to ask lots of open-ended, clean language questions, and I reset my brain before the meeting. All right, curious Mick is going into this meeting today. And then next one, it's going to be compassionate Mick, or it's going to be clarity Mick, all of these things. Or it could be inspirational, or it could be purpose-driven. All of these things, I have these words.
But neither of those start with C. So
yeah, I've just broken my model.
I think that's great. And the other thing, and a great leadership mentor gave me this advice years ago. He said, just like you do, you should have a startup and a shutdown routine to your day every day. That's not time with other people. It's just time alone. And he said, think of yourself, like a computer from the early 90s, right? Like they took 3 or 4 minutes to boot up. What is that time you need to boot up? And what's that? We all had to shut our computers down back in the day too. What does your shutdown routine to the day need to look like, so that you can keep work at work and family life at home, and whatever it is those obligations in the evening look like. But to me, that's been pivotal to staying healthy.
Yeah. I think then the other thing that I'd love to run this past you as well, Zach, the other thing that then comes from it, you used the word mindful before, and I'm going to now I'm going to add the word presence onto that. So when you've taken your time to do that and you are just that little bit more organized, and we're talking little micro moments in the day to make sure that you are organized, then when you're in that meeting, so the person that's most important in my world right now is Zach Montroy. This conversation is the most important thing in my world right now, and you have my undivided attention. If I'm not organized, if I'm not intentional, you get haphazard, Mick, and my mind could be on my next meeting or the meeting after that, or what do I need to pick up on the way home from work today? And it allows me to declutter my mind and for you to feel like I'm fully present with you. And our teams deserve that. Our teams deserve for us to turn up to be 100% present. How does that sit with you?
You're spot on. I think we have bought into the lie that we can multitask. And, especially in the world of remote work and being on Zoom, I can sneak and do this thing on Slack or do this research or finish this email, and the other person doesn't know. We all know the wandering eye look, and know that you're not fully listening or fully present. But also your brain is not made to process to those things all happening at the same time. So I think you really have to reckon with that question. Is this other person worth my full engagement? And hopefully the answer is yes. And if the answer is, and should be yes, if you're leading them, what does that need to look like? What, do you need to shut off everything else on your screen? How can you give them your full presence and engagement? I mean, one thing that I commonly do, you can see me just jotting down notes over here. I'm really bad at remembering what you said and also staying present in what you are saying right now. So I am just taking notes of things that you said throughout the conversation so that my brain's not trying to remember and stay present at the same time. We all have little hacks like that work for us. And I think we just have to find out what that thing is so that we can stay fully engaged, fully present in the conversation.
Yeah, that's really good. And if you want them to be fully engaged and fully present, like you said, Zach, you better give them your undivided attention, right? So it's a to and fro investment. That word investment came up again. They're investing time in you. You're investing time in them. If that's a valuable investment, well, how about a bit of mindfulness and a bit of presence? Yeah, really good. And that probably is a good segue to talk about the other word, which is the word collective. You've already spoken about the leader being self-aware of their own gifts, their own superpowers, but you also said very early, I think it was in the introduction, Zach, you said about being able to identify and help people to bring out their best and create an environment where you can be of service to other people's gifts. So tell me more about this word collective and why it's important to you.
Well, I've noticed that one of your superpowers is remembering. I'm like, I don't even remember saying that. So that you've remembered everything that I've said. I'm a little jealous of that. I'm a lot jealous of that. But, this is probably the people focus, loving people, getting a lot of energy from being around other people. I just feel like life is meant to be lived with others. I love getting to see other people discover their gifts and fully live into those gifts. And so this idea of collective, we do a lot of work with organizations, with teams, with founders, owners of companies. And, I do my best. I love studying. I love growing. I love learning. And also my perspective is my perspective, right? I have a very limited slice of knowledge and understanding and experience. And to me, this idea of a collective, we're better together than any of us are alone. So in starting the company, to me, from the foundation of it was the goal is never for me to be a one-person shop here. The goal for me is to hire people smarter than me, more gifted than me, people who want to do this work, who want to help leaders lead better, to help grow healthy organizations. And that's my job as a leader, is to cultivate that, to lay the groundwork for that, to foster an environment where that is needed and that is rewarded. So that idea of collective to me is, the sum of the parts is greater than any of the, than is on their own. So to me, that really is the heart behind that word.
Yeah, wonderful. So let's unpack that one at a time. So you said discover their gifts. That was one of the key phrases that you used there. And we've got a guest that comes on the show sometimes, Stephen Chedleski, and one of his sayings is it's difficult to read the label on the jar from inside the jar. Not everyone has self-awareness of what they're bringing to the table because it's natural to them. What they find easy, other people find difficult, and they don't even realize it's a gift. How do you help people discover their gifts, Zach?
I'm a little bit of an assessment nerd. So we have a lot of assessments that we use, Strengths Finders, Working Genius, Enneagram. I think, DISC, any of those can start to help build self-awareness. When I'm coaching someone and they really don't understand their gifts, or they don't really have a good articulation of the positive wake and impact that they leave on others, I start to give them the homework of actually going and having a conversation with other people, the people who are closest to you, the people that you work with, the people that you sort of interact with on a day-to-day basis, to start asking that question, like, what's the impact of what I do? What do you see as being my gifts and my abilities? I think that's a great question. We don't often see, when we're sort of in this bubble, we don't see it. We don't consider it a gift or an ability. And I think many people, unfortunately, aren't in environments where where the gratitude is there, where that recognition, where that affirmation is there. But I think to start asking that question, to, go take an assessment and start to, unpack that. Those are all great self-awareness building tools. And, to realize each of us have a unique set of skills and abilities and gifts that we're given is part of the human experience. And discovering those can really unleash, I think, so much joy and fulfillment in our work and what we spend our time on.
So two words that come to mind there were curious and communication. So staying curious and having those conversations, but then the communication and affirmation of, hey, I've noticed that you're really good at this, or having that conversation with someone that's based on gratitude, but it's also based on raising their awareness of what you're seeing. And then you use the word impact so that not just that they understand, hey, I've noticed that you're really good at this skill, but the impact it's bringing to the team is this. So they're not just seeing the skill, they're seeing the meaningfulness of that skill. They're seeing the purpose and meaning behind, okay, so I can play a pivotal role in this organization. I can help this organization be better because of when I bring that skill to the table, because my boss took the time to show me that they saw it. So the affirmation that they saw the skill and that they saw the impact of that skill. I thought that was quite powerful there, Zach. The next question would be how you cultivate it. How do you cultivate someone's superpower or gift in a way that they can flourish in that team and in the organization?
That's a great question. And I really feel like it comes down to feedback and cultivating an environment, a feedback rich environment. I think it would be interesting for all of us and probably convicting for many of us to think about when's the last time that we gave a meaningful piece of feedback to our coworker, to people who lead us, to people whom we have the privilege of leading, and not just, hey, Mick, great job, good podcast, but to really say, hey, I see in you this ability to deeply remember what people said and get really curious and ask amazing questions and get conversation going. When you give feedback like that, you are affirming someone's gifts, abilities, the motivation behind that. And I think cultivating that means, we can hold with open hands our gifts and our abilities. And I want to help you grow in this area. What can I do to resource that growth? What can I do to propel that growth forward? Are there ways that, are there things that you need to be doing that feel really risky and feel really uncertain? And, you are great at XYZ, and I want you to try this because you have such a deep giftedness in this area, and it may colossally fail, but you're going to learn from it. You're going to grow from it, and we're going to celebrate those learnings together. That all comes with a healthy feedback environment, right? That feedback is just a norm, both positive and corrective, that it doesn't just happen, on the fringes. So I think that's a really big piece of cultivating that. And additionally, spending time and energy and money on helping people develop those gifts. I mean, Gallup has done a ton of research on this, and us spending time and money and energy on growing in our gifts is like 10 times a better investment than trying to grow in a blind spot, an area of weakness.
Absolutely. And the whole concept of strengths building, et cetera, you can become incredibly good at your job if you focus on your strengths. And guess what? With the weaknesses, one of the secrets is to surround yourself with people that complement your weaknesses. And you don't have to be good at everything if you surround yourself with the right team. The things that I loved there, Zach, was, the feedback doesn't have to be always constructive or negative or corrective, as you put it. It can be positive, and we forget that sometimes. And the second part was how specific you were. It wasn't just, hey, great presentation today, which doesn't really help anyone apart from giving them a bit of a confidence boost. It would be great presentation today. And you know what I love? I loved it when you started with that story about blah, 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 blah. You really captured people's attention there. And then at the end of the presentation, you were able to hook it back in with a clear call to action. That's specific feedback that someone can take away and go, oh, okay, I'll do that again next time.
Why? So let's pause there. I'm totally reversing roles here. Why don't you think we do that more often as leaders?
Complacency? A great question. I think a little bit of complacency and a little bit of thinking that, the person knows that. They know they did a good job. Or my job is to, of course I tell them great presentation because I want to give them a pat in the back and thank them. But they probably, same thing, what I said before, people don't always read the label on the jar. They don't have the self-awareness of what their gift is. So people take it for granted a little bit. So I think it's a little bit of complacency. What do you think?
I think you're spot on. I think the cheap feedback makes us feel better. Like, I checked the box, right? Like I told them great job. I did the thing. What you just said, like that requires thought. It requires energy. It requires intentionality. And I think, complacency, we're not giving people what they need. And sometimes that comes out of hurt. We weren't modeled that early on. And I think, to develop a habit, we have to give it time, intentionality, and a lot of effort. And I think it's just easy to forget. And yet probably one of the most valuable ways we could spend our time. I mean, taking time to give a teammate that feedback, I am guessing is way more valuable than, responding to XYZ email that's in my email box.
Yeah, good one. So you're now talking about intentionality again, about where you spend your time. Love that. And I feel like we've stumbled across a really important call to action here for today's discussion, Zach. So everyone listening to the show, if you find yourself in that situation today where you're about to give someone a pat on the back, don't just say good job. Say really good job today. And what I particularly liked was X, Y, and Z, because then they'll know exactly what they need to repeat again in the future, and they'll continue to build on those strengths. Don't just say good job. Okay, really good one, Zach. I've got a challenging question for you that may be interesting with your HR background. Now, we're talking here about gifts. We're talking about superpowers. We're talking about uniqueness. And yet, what I see in traditional organizational design, I see job descriptions, I see position descriptions, I hear people told to stay in their swim lane and understand your roles and responsibilities, etc., etc. How much are we constraining people's gifts and superpowers by giving them a rigid job description versus something that might be a little bit more flexible? Any thoughts?
Well, I think the only time that anyone ever looks at job descriptions is when we post the position, like when we're hired or when we're having to repost the job or when there's a problem. I mean, no one like gets out their job description on the daily and says, oh gosh, I better do these 4 things. So the fact that we make them so rigid and wordy, and it really astounds me why we spend so much time on them. I think the better thing to do here is, number one, we have to hire people that we trust. We have to create environments of trust. And if there's violations of that, again, we're having those conversations. But I always go back to Dan Sullivan's concept of who, not how. I want to hire the right who's, and I don't want to micromanage them and tell them how to do their job. So one of the things that we do in organizations is we set out just a really, like, you should be able to, on a 3x5 index card, what's the mission of this job? At the end of the day, at the end of the week, what is the intent behind this job? What does a win look like? And that should be a sentence, not, a 12 sentence run-on sentence, from grad school trying to cram a paragraph in. But what is that one sentence description? And then bullet point, what are the responsibilities and what is the number, the most important number or metric that this role is responsible for and has authority and accountability to influence? So not just a lagging number that I don't have any influence over, but like, what am I responsible for? How am I going to be held accountable? And those are the things, like, that's the stuff all of us remember about our jobs. Now I've got clear marching orders, and now I get to go, like, I have the highway that I have to be on, and you've given me boundaries and guardrails, but you're not trying to micromanage me. I think the rigidity of some of the job descriptions I've seen, like, number one, no one's going to look at that past day 2, maybe, of their job. So why are we trying to create that rigidity?
All right, nice one, Zach. I think you and I have got a similar school of thought there, which is be clear about outcomes and accountabilities, be clear about values and behaviors, and then empower the person to just get on with it. Just get on with it. Yeah. All right, really good. Now, speaking of which, you said the words better together before. So coming back to collective, I'd love to talk to you about co-creation. So now we've got this collection of people. You've got a team of 7. Let's use your team for a moment. You've got a team of 7. I'm sure that 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1, if we do it well, is going to end up equaling much more than 7. How do we create that environment where, as you said it before, where the sum of the outcome is greater than the sum of all of the contributing parts?
Yeah, I think it's sort of a special recipe, right? I mean, I think it always comes down to trust, that we trust one another. We trust the mission that we're called to as an organization. And I also think it means, I'm going to check my ego at the door, but I'm not going to check my skills and my abilities at the door. When I say I'm checking my ego, what I mean is I'm checking the fact that I need to be right and that I need to get credit for this thing that we're creating. We get to share in credit. We get to share in the collective results. So if we have trust and a commitment to, the best idea wins here, the best, we're going to conflict and debate, and, we're going to challenge one another, and all for the good of what it is that we are creating and doing, like, that requires me to be deeply vulnerable and also really courageous, right? right to say, here's what I think this should be, and I might be wrong. Something's not sitting right about this. Well, maybe it's because, that we're able to have those conversations with one another, but we've done the work of building trust with each other. So that way I don't see your challenge as an interpersonal, vendetta that you're trying to get to, but really that your commitment to the best thing that we're creating is there.
I want to play back to you what I'm taking away from that and test something with you. So the word trust has come up multiple times. And I think that's key, that we do trust each other, that we're holding space for each other. The second thing you said was about I'm coming into the meeting not being shy about my own strengths. You didn't use those exact words, but you're owning your own strengths and what you bring to the table. And then when I'm hearing you talk, I'm hearing an element of vulnerability and I'm hearing an element of humility for the things that we're not good at. The thing I want to check with you here is around humility. And we talk about leaders need to be humble. And by the way, I fully agree with that, with a caveat that's coming, which is what you said before, which is about owning your strengths. Because I think a lot of people out there, they think being a humble leader and it results in self-deprecating behavior, right? So you play down your strengths. I'm going to say we're almost societal expectations or a learned behavior that we're trained to suppress even our strengths because it's, you're not very humble. You're not very humble. If you're out there saying, well, the gift that I bring to the table is deep listening skills, right? I think it's fine to say that as long as it's coupled with, but what I'm not good at is X, Y, Z, and you're really good at that. So together we can co-create something that's greater than either of us could do individually. So we're better together. That's still a humble saying, but it's owning the strength. And I think where humility goes wrong is where people think, to be humble, it means that you should never big note yourself. And I'm not talking about being grandiose or anything like that. You know what I mean? Get out there and be confident in your strengths and say, hey, you know what? I'm really good at X, Y, Z, but I'm not good at ABC. You are good at ABC. Let's work together. How does that sit with you?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And I think the commitment there's a commitment to getting it right, not being right. I don't need to check who I am at the door for us to get this right. I also don't need all the credit for it either. And I don't need to be the one who's right. We're collectively bringing our skills and abilities here to get it right together. I think that truly is the picture of humility.
Yeah, really good. All right. So bring yourself to the table, bring all of yourself to the table, and then hold space for others. Yeah, that's really good. What it makes me think of is Otto Scharmer. And Otto Scharmer is the author of the book Theory U, or creator of Theory U, and generative listening. And one of the videos that he does, Zach, if you haven't seen this, check it out. And everyone in the audience also take a look at this. He uses an example of an orchestra to illustrate this point around co-creation. And you can imagine, just let me take you on a journey here for a second. A solo violin player is amazing in their own right, all right? Absolutely amazing. And then when you bring a string quartet together, all of a sudden it's something different. And the string quartet can create something that the solo violin player could never create. Then when you go to mini orchestra, oh, that's new again. And then when you go to full orchestra, you're like, oh, wow. And then when you put a tenor out the front, like a Placido Domingo or something like that, now it's again. Now, each individual had a superpower that they brought to the table. The conductor was able to literally draw out of each individual contributor their superpower to create something that could never have been created if they didn't come together. How does that sit with you?
Yeah. And I think too, the beauty of that is each of them are doing the work, right? I'm not coming to the orchestra asking the conductor to, teach me how to play violin. Like I'm also investing in that work. And yeah, I can go play on my own and do a good job and play with a few others and sound great. And then I think the collective power of that and coming together and, the conductor's job, like if he didn't have an orchestra, she didn't have an orchestra, would just be standing up there waving their hands. Their job is now to get the best out of this group of people. I love that. I love that illustration.
And I'm going to reverse something you just said there, which was very powerful, by the way, which I don't expect to turn up to orchestra practice and for the conductor to teach me how to play the violin. I absolutely love that. But do you also notice that the conductor doesn't pick up the violin and go, no, I'm going to do this today? They don't push people out the road either, do they? Right, so that might be a great, to use a musical term, crescendo, and to leave people with that metaphor to think about in the workplace today. Have a think about that. Are you the conductor that's bringing all of these collectively wonderful, individually wonderful and collectively wonderful people together to create great music? Or are you expert in your field and going around and trying to play the piano and the violin and the saxophone and the drums and you name it? Are you trying to do everything, or are you the one that is bringing everyone together to create something that couldn't exist if the people didn't come together? I think that's a great metaphor to leave us on there, Zach. So what I'd like to do now is go to our rapid round. What's the one thing that you know now that you wish you knew when you were 20?
I wish at 20 years old, I had known the importance of leading myself, of being inwardly sound as a leader, and the impact that that would have on me and on other people, that requires a lot of discipline, a lot of work, a lot of intentionality. I wish I had known that.
Yeah, really good lesson, Zach. And thank you for sharing all of that today as well. What's your favorite book?
Well, I'm going to have a problem just saying one. So my sort of top three right now, The Only Leaders Worth Following is an amazing book. B 2.0, so Beyond Entrepreneurship 2.0 is another amazing book that Jim Collins re-released. And then Think Again by Adam Grant. There's some great stuff in that book.
Yeah, nice one. Okay, what's your favorite quote?
I'm going to combine two, but same person said it. So I'm a Brene Brown fanboy. So I love clear is kind, unclear is unkind. That should be plastered on every leader's wall. And I also love the quote, daring leaders, so courageous leaders are never silent about hard things. That also is a really convicting quote to me.
That's interesting. It kind of circled us back to that thing about feedback on both sides. Clear as kind. Giving feedback needs to be specific, including the good and the bad. Needs to be specific, and stop avoiding it. All right, very good. Finally, people are going to be, I'm sure, enthralled by what you've shared today, Zach. How do people find you if they would like to know more about you and your team?
Yeah, I'd love for them to visit our website. intentioncollective.co is our website. So we've got a lot of resources there and ways to get in touch with us on our website.
All right. Brilliant, Zach. It's been such a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you for sharing your insights and wisdom around intentionality and around the fact that we are better together as a collective. So the Intention Collective. It's been such a great privilege having you here today. Thank you for sharing your time and investing your time with us.
Thanks so much, Mick. I appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you for listening to The Leadership Project at mickspears.com. A huge call out to Faris Sadek for his video editing of all of our video content, and to all of the team at TLP. Joanne Goes On, Gerald Calabo, and my amazing wife, Say Spears. I could not do this show without you. Don't forget to subscribe to the Leadership Project YouTube channel, where we bring you interesting videos each and every week. And you can follow us on social, particularly on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. Now, in the meantime, please do take care, look out for each other, and join us on this journey as we learn together and lead together.